Well, if you ever spend any time in Austin, Texas, hopefully one day in your life you'll get to go to the St. Cecilia Hotel. It is the most charming little boutique space, probably the most charming that I saw at any time that I've been in Austin, Texas, as I was very recently for South by Southwest and all of the corresponding industry festivities that are going on there. Podcast in this industry has really become a big factor, as was covered by our friend Ashley Carmen at Bloomberg. And so we had a great conversation courtesy of iHeart Media, who iHeart takes over the St. Cecilia during South by, and they put on a lot of events, and they were kind enough to partner with us at Oxford Road and to bring a few friends together with us for a conversation that may change the way you think about how you live and work. A lot of times what we do on this show, which by the way is called the Media Roundtable, thank you very much, and I am your host, Dan Granger. I'm the CEO of Oxford Road, FYI. But as I was saying, typically we come on here and what we like to talk about is advertising and things that marketers need to know when they are advertising on these, podcast and cousin channels like radio and YouTube and stuff like that. Well, this conversation that we're going to bring you into, which is a kind of rebroadcast of a private event that we had at South by at this beautiful little space, is a little broader. And it includes some people that you may have heard of. Tim Ferriss, the great Tim Ferriss, who's, not only a legend in this business, but, as an author and as an investor, and so really influential guy and a really innovative thinker. And Dr. Laurie Santos, who, she is like the foremost expert on happiness out of Yale, and both not just podcasters, but having a conversation that goes beyond marketing about what the hell do we do in this modern world where we are also torn between having to compete and knowing that we need to embrace and fully leverage all of these exponentially expanding capabilities that technology and AI is unleashing for us and on us. But also, what do we cling to and how do we live, like I said, at home and at work? This one's going to make you think. It might make you happy. It might make you sad, but it's going to stretch you. It stretched me. And I think it's not just about marketing, although it's about marketing too, but it's really about everything. And it's about who we are and where do we go from here. So I'm really grateful to be able to bring this episode to you. And I think you're going to enjoy. Take a listen. We're talking a little bit about work, talking a little bit about AI. Maybe you've been hearing about that. We're going to talk more about that. But this next panel, we're going to get slightly more existential. We're going to talk a little bit about, okay, we know where it's going. We may not know what it looks like. Tim might. But we don't really know how to deal with it in our lives. And I think one of the decisions we all have to make every day now is, where do we need to relentlessly pursue leaning into these technological changes, and where do we very deliberately need to not do that and run decisively in the other direction? So we're going to get into some of that, and I'm so grateful for the two people who have agreed to join us today to unpack this. First, I'd like you to join me in welcoming Dr. Laurie Santos. She is the host of The Happiness Lab, which is one of iHeart's leading podcasts. She's a professor at Yale, and in 300 years, her course is the most in-demand course, if you can imagine. Congratulations on that, and she's very committed to the work that she's doing on happiness through her podcast. So thank you, Laurie, for joining us. And then, of course, we have Tim Ferriss, who has been in our business for really since the beginning, one of the kind of founders of the industry, one of the first really successful authors to really bet on this medium. Tim is the author of 5 New York Times bestsellers, including Tools of Titans and the 4-Hour Work Week. He has over 1 billion downloads of his podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show. So thank you for joining us, Tim.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's start with some easy stuff. Lori, are we okay? Like, what's going on? How are people doing right now? How are we doing?
I think overall we're not okay, which is why podcasts like mine could be so successful, unfortunately or unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges presented by all these new tools is how they're going to affect us, right? The last panel was really talking about how they're going to affect work and how they're going to affect our bottom line, but there's a real question about what these things are doing to us. And I think there's reasons to worry that these things are affecting us more than we expect, right? One of the things we know is that when we cognitively offload labor to something else, we lose these interesting benefits that come with doing it on our own. I think about this with my college students who would love to completely cognitively offload all their homework, all their essays, all their theses, all their papers. But if you think back to a really hard paper that you might have written back in the day, you got something out of that. When you engage with things effortfully, it feels good, right? And this is what the psychologist Mickey Inslick calls the paradox of effort. Effort sucks. We do not want to do effort. But then when we engage with things that are effortful, we feel better. And one big worry is that we're going to start offloading all kinds of stuff that has the opportunity in these tiny moments to make us feel better. And I'm guessing the creatives in the room have this moment, like you get busy and like there's a quick thing you could just like offload to one of these tools and it comes back and sadly it's like good, you know? And so you feel like in terms of the product, you were fine, but in terms of the process, something feels kind of slightly icky. And I think this is something we need to think more about with these tools. It's not to say that these tools are bad. I think that these tools have a real place to potentially even improve our well-being. But we need to understand these icky moments a little bit better so that we can use these tools in a way that's healthy for our psychology.
And if there were like a happiness index, and I don't know if there is such a thing, but you probably have your thumb on the pulse as much as anybody. Do you see a straight correlation between people's happiness and the advances that we've been experiencing in technology?
Yeah, I mean, there's not perfect data on saying that it's about technology, but when survey folks have tried to do this, they find that particularly the technology seems to be decreasing our well-being. There's one not incredibly scientific, but published in the Harvard Business Review, so take it which you will, survey about different industries and how the use of AI is affecting burnout. And they found that in every industry they surveyed, burnout was going up, but here's a sad one. The level that burnout was going up in marketing was the highest. It was 29% in marketing, and the second other lowest one I think was like 18% in tech. So AI tools are leading to even more burnout in marketing than they are in people who are programming. So take with that what you will. But yeah, I think it's contributing to the general pattern that we're seeing, which is that overall our well-being has been going down over time. And next week on the 20th is International World Happiness Day, and the World Happiness Report will come out. And because I get to see the report in advance because I'm this nerdy psychologist, I can tell you like it's only getting worse. Like this year is worse than last year. It's particularly worse in English speaking in US countries. And I think that these new tools have something to do with that.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah. Hey, it's just the facts. Y'all need the facts, right?
No, we appreciate you bringing them. Tim, what the hell happened? Like, what? No, maybe you can just like table set for us. Like, what is like this moment in history? It feels different, right? Like it's always been like John Henry versus the machine, right? And like it only goes in one direction, but like now the machine seems like it's kind of everything all of a sudden. I mean, can you like help just articulate what's going on right now that may be different than themes we've seen before?
I'll take a stab at it as a muggle. Full disclosure, not an engineer writing white papers, but have invested in early stage startups for about 20 years and lived in Silicon Valley for 17 of those. So actually, I guess it's more than 20 years now. God, I'm getting old. Lucky I went bald early. It makes you seem like you're not aging as quickly. But to answer the question, I would say that my 30,000-foot observations would be that this is different than what we've experienced, and it's an accelerant for things that were already trending. So the increasing rates of anxiety, depression, et cetera, especially within specific age groups, and in some cases leaning more heavily towards young women versus young men, have been really well documented by people like Jonathan Haidt and so on. This predates AI as the flash boil moment, but AI is an incredible accelerant for all of these things. And it can accelerate in good ways as well. But I would say that there are a few things that make it fundamentally different. Number one, there are people like Jeff Bezos who compare it to the discovery of fire. That's not what you would have said about SAS 5 years ago. No offense to SAS or anything like that. But in addition to that, and maybe more important for this discussion, there are a couple of characteristics that distinguish it from things that came before. Number one is that for most of the history of software development, if you designed and executed a piece of software perfectly, it did exactly what you expected it to do. Right? This is the first time when the people building these tools, and I'm involved with a lot of these companies, cannot tell you what these models are going to do. And that's just talking about LLMs. I mean, AI goes a lot further than just LLMs, but the second is the rate of change is very different from the vantage point of human history, which is why I think the comparisons to the Industrial Revolution are misplaced. Because yes, with an Industrial Revolution or something else that takes, say, decades or centuries, you do have time as a species to adapt and retool and upskill and so on. But the rate of change with this is fundamentally much more compressed. I mean, much, much, much more compressed. And then furthermore, I would say humans, and we saw this during COVID, despite what you might think of COVID, but we could talk about the Spanish flu. Maybe that's less controversial. Humans are very bad, inherently not good at thinking about exponential growth. Right? So I would say with these models, when you're looking at, say, a 10x improvement in the number of parameters with each new model release, like it's hard to grasp what that actually means. But I would say that this is one of the first times when people who are building the technology really without a straight face cannot say that they know what this is going to look like 3 years from now.
Yeah.
They can probably give you some roadmap of what their plans are, but they cannot tell you what the technology is actually going to do. And I'm seeing this in a lot of the startups I'm involved with. And everyone should watch the documentary on DeepMind and Demis Hassabis, which is available on YouTube and other places for free. You can find it. Everyone should watch that. It's I think, illuminating if you're starting from kind of first principles to get an understanding of what we're actually looking at here.
Well, and just anecdotally, Tim, when you're an early adopter on this stuff, right? So how is it practically changing the way that you and your team work in your business and in as a creator?
Well, I think I'm not the first person to say this, but technology makes a wonderful tool and a terrible master, and I try to be aware of some of what we just heard about, in the sense that there are things I think AI is an accelerant, right? You have sort of augmented intelligence, but it could degrade or improve your intelligence and your capacities depending on what you do. I'm sure everyone has had the experience of going from not using Google Maps to using Google Maps, and then you're like, do I really need a fucking app to tell me how to get to my coffee shop? Like, it's ridiculous. And similarly, sure, if you're, say, you could train to run a marathon and then take an Uber from point A to point B, it'll be faster. But sooner than you might expect, you end up in a WALL-E situation where it's like, okay, you're being taken around in a hover scooter, and now you can't use your legs, right? Because there's a certain atrophy involved. So I try to keep that in mind before I use these tools. As it stands right now, and the siren song of using them for everything is strong, and it's just going to get stronger. Because frankly, if I train the models on my writing, what it creates is very close to what I would create. But as it stands right now on the writing front, I will use it for editing, and I find it incredibly helpful for that. So I'll train it on specific editors and say, you are person X, edit this piece. We use AI every day, and one of my employees is basically chartered with using, to the extent that he can, not just the primary models, but any frontier models he can get access to. He's playing with everything except for Claude-Bot. That's verboten. No Claude-Bots on local machines having to do with business. Absolutely not. I'll let my friends be the first monkey shot into space on that. Like, sure, yeah, well, yeah, let that run your bank account. Let's see what happens. So we're using the tools constantly every day. I would say from a research perspective, they're just unlike anything I've ever seen, ever. I mean, what the type of research you can do. And then on a personal level, I mean, using it for, and caveat emptor, you have to be careful with this, but I have friends who have dumped their full genome into these models and any other data they might have from a medical perspective, and they've caught important things that every doctor, every specialist has missed. And these are, in some cases, centimillionaires, billionaires, right? They have the best doctors money can buy. So I do think that we are going to see a lot of upside with these things, but the fact that the people who are kind of steering the ship don't know where the ship is going to be is something at least you just should be aware of.
It's so hard when you get to see the thing work, right? Like a couple years ago, you know, it was easy to dismiss the idea of it, but now you actually start to see it doing things in ways that we were doing it ourselves and cannot. So Lori, I'm really interested in how you advise people to make a decision to go the human route or the artificial route when you know the artificial output will be better.
Yeah, I think it gets back to something that I think we need to think about a lot more, which is like what the goal of something is. Like, let's say you're writing ad copy, right? Like, what's the goal? Maybe I just want the most creative ad copy. Maybe actually part of my goal is I want it really fast, right? I need to meet a deadline. But you're also skills building, right? You're also like, and if you're not early in your career in skills building, you're doing the thing that Tim mentioned, which is like you're keeping your skills up. And I think that is about recognizing the difference between the product and the process. Often we're like product, like we just need to hit the bottom line. But there's a process there that's about your learning. And I think we know so much from the cognitive science about the consequences of when you start letting tools do the work for you and what happens to your skills over time. Tim mentioned the idea of like using Google Maps to like get to your coffee shop. Turns out that neuroscientists have actually studied this. They studied this in London cab drivers who actually have to pass this really elaborate exam to show that they know the streets of London, or at least that's the way it used to be. Neuroscientists back in the day when they did this exam studied the hippocampus of these cab drivers. This is the part of the brain that represents where your spatial memory, like how you get around. And hippocampuses grew as these taxi drivers were studying for the exam and using the material they learned, right? These neuroscientists have now gone back to these cab drivers who are now allowed, as you would expect most cab drivers are, to use tools like Google Maps and so on. And what you find is that hippocampal growth just isn't there anymore. And in some cases, in the older cab drivers, they're seeing like negative changes over time, right? That's cab drivers, but the worry is that we're doing that with every time we're cognitively offloading to one of these tools. How quickly can I write an email to my boss? How quickly can I get through an executive summary of this book, right? How creatively can I make this copy? How much can I make it sound like a human? And I think that, you know, the focus on the product means we might be losing something really critical that we're not paying attention to. I think there's also a question that we, as we use these tools, my team is using these tools, maybe not as much as Tim and his team are using these tools, but we're using these tools a lot. And something that we try to keep in mind is like, are they actually really helping the ultimate product? Are they actually really helping our productivity? Because there's some subtle cases in which I think there's an open question about whether they are, for a couple of reasons. One is that like these AI tools make it really easy to get stuff done, really easy to produce stuff. It makes doing more accessible, but then sometimes we do more just for the sake of doing more. I'll give an example from my team. You know, I have a social media manager who makes lots of social media posts, and when he used to have to make the drawings himself, he'd send me maybe 2 options to look at. Now, because he has these tools that make a bunch, I get an email full of like 50 of these things, and I got to spend time making the decision. And we know from choice overload that I'm going to actually make a worse decision because I had more options, right? Is it making the product better? Is it making me more productive? Was it a good use of my time? Like, I don't know. There's some nuance there. I think the other thing we have to tackle, which a lot of folks in social science are worried about a lot, is the idea of AI work slop, right? My social media example was one where he was giving me good images, but sometimes when we send the AI thing to people, we're not giving the good stuff. We're giving like the fast thing. And another recent survey came out that looked at like how much time people spend correcting the work slop. And the person who receives the work slop often reports they can spend up to 2 hours trying to fix it because it was like, was the copy so crappy that I can't? You start fixing it and you're like, maybe it was just too crappy. And it's like, that's not helping your productivity either, right? And so in all these cases, I think there's a real question about, especially when we think long term and not for that email or that piece of copy that I had to write, are we actually doing it better, or is there something being lost? And I think if taking that long term view, I think helps, because when it's about the marathon, you want to run the marathon yourself and not take the Uber. But when it's about something fast, maybe like just do the fast version. And so keeping that in mind, I think, has been really helpful for me and my team.
What is your favorite podcast other than the Media Roundtable? Is it Joe Rogan, Call Her Daddy, Mel Robbins, Crime Junkie, Amy Poehler, Smartless, Pivot? What are you into? It's such an interesting dinner table topic to ask people. You learn a lot, and people are so passionate about this medium. They're so passionate about it. And where do you listen? Where do you watch? Is it YouTube? Is it Apple? Is it Spotify? You are in the center of what we do as an organization. That is our business. We are Oxford Road, and we help some of the leading brands in the world be successful advertising in these channels. We're the largest specialist that exists. We buy the most ads in this channel. So we are actually powering this industry. We buy over $500 million of ads per year for wonderful brands like Shopify, Wayfair, DraftKings, Masterclass, Chime, Quince, AG1, Mint Mobile. We're interrupting all your favorite podcasts, including not just the usual suspects, but there are thousands in the long tail that are great niche shows with really loyal audiences. And what happens is when you advertise there, the host really only gets to pick one in your category. And so if you're the first there, you can kind of lock up that relationship, that annuity, and be recommended to those audiences for years. So it's a powerful space. And it's one where we have the privilege of leading right now. We've got lots of great ways to de-risk our clients' campaigns, like our Orbit data set that's getting close to $2 billion of performance data. So we know what's going to work in advance. We also have Audiolytics, which are our proprietary ad grading system to make sure every word counts and is always getting optimized, and then de-risked through our brand safety taxonomy as well, to make sure we watch out for your brand values. If you want to win in this channel, and you've got something to say, you got a product worth talking about, and you want to get into this trust economy, and you're serious about it, you really want to be a part of it over the long haul, we'd love to talk to you. OxfordRoad.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you like free stuff. It's called The Influencer, and it's free. We also have a lot of good thought pieces if you want to learn at OxfordRoad.com. That is OxfordRoad.com. And are you both seeing a kind of a groundswell of demand around maybe a counter revolution to all this? Things like, we were just talking about sabbaticals. I'm hearing more about people taking a Sabbath. Is there going to be a movement where many of us just kind of become Quaker-like and go off the grid a little bit, or at least in part of our lives? Where does it go?
I could take a stab at it, not just because I'm watching this reasonably large audience over time and have been watching them for 2 decades now. I would say that even 5 years ago, looking at some of the earliest inklings of this stuff, thought there might be a few things that happen pretty quickly. One is an explosion of not just interest in established religions, but new religions. Because people will want, as it becomes impossible to distinguish fact from fiction, real video from fake video, they're going to want something to believe in, whether that's dictated from on high in the form of commandments or something else. So the other form that'll take is that the moat for creators, or one of the moats, will just be credibility, in the sense that people will be looking for some type of personal curation because they will not believe anything else. I also think, and then the other was in real life, right? So what does the blowback look like? What is the pushback? What is for Dune fans out there, like the Butlerian Jihad, what does that look like, actually, when people push back against the thinking machines, which is happening and it will continue to happen, which is why I was creating a analog card game for 2 years, right? That came out not too long ago. It's like, okay, let me test the waters and like, let's see what happens with this. And so I would say that my expectation, I mean, I'm watching in real life very, very quickly and intensely, and that I might actually co-found my first ever startup, Glutton for Punishment, not too far from now, purely analog, purely in real life. Like effectively almost no digital component. And I would also say, like, I do think there are ways that you can stem the tide in a sense of like psychological implosion. One is read books like The Comfort Crisis, like voluntary physical and mental challenge can help create a certain amount of protection against unexpected physical and psychological stress, right? So I do think you can be proactive about this. And then there's the question of how you use these tools or which tools you choose not to use. Like I have not had social media on my phone for 3 or 4 years now. And you might think that my professional life is sort of predicated on some of that. But my mental health is also predicated on minimizing use of some of those. So there are ways to work around it, right? I can still use those things on a laptop. I'm adding friction where it's beneficial to me to have friction, and I'm removing friction, say, just in like working out, moving the body. Like we're evolved to be creatures moving in space in social groups. So ensuring that that is a part of your weekly diet offsets also a lot of the damage that these tools can do if they become over dominant. I think I meandered quite far afield from your question.
I'm still stuck on Tim Ferriss just told us that he's ready to create a startup that is completely analog.
No tech startup.
Which may be a bellwether for the end of times.
I think in a way it's just, if I could say, I mean, look, I mean, if it's end of times, it's fucking end of times, and we've got locusts and like, trouble brewing. But I think that in a way, and you see this also in some of the younger generations, like what I find funny is that you meet a lot of these parents who are like, the kids, and the politicians certainly are up there, crying fake tears and talking about the kids. And it's like, what I've seen in the younger generations that follow my stuff, they're actually very hip to this. Mm-hmm. They're like, this is bad news, and we are going to figure out ways to not use technology in some ways. We were talking beforehand about like younger generations going back to old school iPods and so on. It's these people who need to worry because we're like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I do think that up to a certain point, you can rationalize using these things that deep down are bad for you, right? It's like everyone's like, you open Instagram for a second, and then you're like, I can't feel my legs. I'm sitting on a toilet. Why? Oh, it's been 30 minutes. What the fuck am I doing? That's not good for you. But you can be like, oh, it's important for my business. It's this and this. There will come a point where that type of defense and rationalizing is completely indefensible, right? Like, you can't actually say it with a straight face and believe it. And I think we will actually be forced to go back to like the people around the fire, moving around in real life. I do think that whether we like it or not, that is going to become so painfully obvious that we have this deficiency in those things that in a way, like the technology might just beat us over the head strongly enough that there is a return to a lot of things that we have neglected more or less since social media became so ubiquitous. I don't know. That's the hope.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with what Tim is saying. I think we're going to see a big move back to in real life. And this mirrors something that I saw as a professor on campus at Yale during COVID, right? COVID was this time where like my students were on their screen all the time. And when they had the option to be together in person, all they wanted to do was not be on a screen. Like this was an unusually cold semester at Yale, this like kind of, I think, November 2020, when students are back on campus, but there's no like vaccines or any hope for this stuff. And every opportunity they had to be together outside, in person, together, talking face to face, they took, right? The whole thing we had about, oh, students are on their screens all the time and they're playing too much video games and they're on social media. No, my students wanted every available opportunity to feel face to face. And I think that's the same thing is going to happen in the face of these things. We're going to want moments of communication that can't be AI mediated. You're going to get so worried about the fact that your boss sends you a chat GPT email that you're going to go to your boss's office and talk in a different way. And I think that a nice thing about that is that it's going to become more special, right? We're going to appreciate those moments more. But getting back to something else Tim said, I think that because as these tools get easier and easier, we're going to start to see a return to the benefits of friction, to the benefits of that like kind of cognitive moment when it's like I had to push myself kind of hard. And interestingly, also I think to the benefits of failure. Like, as we said, these tools right now are pretty good. Like, you throw your copy into it and you feel a little icky, be like, damn, that was good. The exponential function means it's going to be way freaking good months from now and years from now, right? And I think we're going to get back to wanting to do things like a little bit crappily. Like, I think we're going to get back to kind of wanting to do some DIY. We're going to get back to valuing the stuff that showed that it was my effort and I'm not perfect and I'm just human. And I think that there's something oddly encouraging, at least for me, about that.
So we're almost at the end of our time, and you're talking to a patio full of marketers generally, right, in some capacity.
Apparently
and,
miserable ones based on the new
as
survey.
it turns
Sorry,
out,
folks,
yeah, sorry. But look, I think we were all like, this is cool, but now we have to go live our lives and face increasing tremendous competitive pressure from all sides with a bar that is getting raised every single day on all of us. Mm-hmm. And so I want to play a little game that I just made up. I want to ask you both, what is one thing you must do to leverage what is now available and becoming available to us to stay competitive professionally? And then I'm going to ask you to close with, what is one thing you must or must not do to maintain your sanity? Mm-hmm. So let's start with the productivity one, shall we?
So that means you, Tim. Sorry.
I was like, productivity is productivity. Oh, God. All right. So what we must do?
Yeah.
I mean, look, if I were a marketer, and I think we're all marketers on some level, we're certainly salespeople on some level. If you need to persuade anyone to do anything, or you want to sell ideas, I would actually use these tools to study, and I've been doing this, like what do brands do that have existed for a long time, or people who have stood the test of time, do to establish trust and credibility? Like, how do you establish trust and credibility? I think that is going to be a scarce resource. Yeah. So I think doing a deep dive, you can use these tools. Like, they can help you to figure that kind of stuff out. But like, what creators have been around for a long time, right, and have been able to sort of reinvent but not compromise credibility, and therefore they have this ability to curate for their audiences, right? And what that might mean is that instead of going after a handful of like marquee huge people, you're actually going for a sort of more distributed approach in terms of selecting creators you partner with. I really don't like that word very much, because, and part of the reason I don't like it is that the creators, right, who right now, and I've seen this, who are making compromises to appease the algorithm gods, they're going to be roadkill, right? So, for instance, I mean, I've had shorts that have had hundreds of millions of views. Downloads impact, zero, because the platform's directive is to keep people on the platform. That's how they derive the most value from these people in terms of serving advertising and otherwise. So anything that the platform can do to prevent people from leaving the platform, they will. And so I think folks, and AI determined ads and so on, like I use AI to help with all sorts of split testing and stuff. But if you're competing in an algo chasing game, and by extension, if you're marketers who are depending on people who do that, I think the window for that working is going to close very quickly. I think it's going to be really hard to make that work longitudinally. So from a marketer perspective, I would look at that. I would really I would be reading things like the Blue Ocean Strategy. I would be reading things like a very old book. There's one chapter in it, The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. There's one chapter called The Law of Category. I would read that. 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly. I'd be reading that. I think that a lot of the people who are actually going to convert the best right now would not consider themselves creators. They would not have extremely large audiences, but they would have people who really, really, really trust them. You can use the tools to discern that. I'll stop there, and then I can grab the second part afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, you asked the two questions: what should we do to succeed, and then what we should do to remain sane. And I think my answer is like combining both of those, because what we know about human performance is that we perform better when we feel better, right? You put doctors in a good mood by making them watch some silly cat videos. They come up with the best results as a doctor, right? They see through the hard diagnoses and they get to the thing that, you know, these doctors weren't seeing and all the data that Tim was finding, right? We know that mood matters for our individual performance, and we also know that our happiness matters for a firm's performance. One of my favorite studies of 2025, because nerdy professors like me have there's like the Spotify Wrapped list, but we have like our favorite studies of 2025. My favorite study of 2025 was this Oxford paper that partnered with the job website Indeed, where they got over 150 million data points on people's happiness at work across 5,000 different companies. And they asked a really interesting, many of which were publicly traded companies. And so they asked an interesting question, which was like, does happiness at work predict a firm's success, like in terms of stock prices? And they find an incredibly strong positive correlation. In fact, if you take the top 100 happiest firms and plot how that as like maybe like an index does in the market, it actually beats the S&P 500 and like the Dow Jones. It's like, what we know is that happier workers perform better. And I think that that correlation is going to remain true in the world of new tools that we have. We need to figure out ways that we're using these tools in ways that the ickiness of these tools doesn't actually impede our happiness. And so I think really thinking about how we can be using these tools in ways that boost our well-being, that reduce productivity, that get rid of the crap jobs so that we can feel less burned out, but don't introduce new sources of burnout. That is going to, I think, be the key for me. It always has been, I think, in all the data we know about companies. I think that's going to remain true in terms of productivity, even with these tools in place.
All right, so on the sanity side, I'll add to that. I'll try to keep it simple. I mean, I write like 700-page books, so I'm clearly not very good at that sometimes. But if you take care of your body will take care of your mind. So really focus on physical movement, physical interaction. But for instance, you were mentioning hippocampal sort of atrophy in these cab drivers. It's like if you do something called Norwegian 4x4, it's a type of training. It's like that has been demonstrated in the literature to improve hippocampal volume, right? And if you do it for 6 months, 3 times a week, the benefits extend up to 5 years. It's fucking crazy, actually. But there are things you can do physically that will help your mental health and your well-being. So I would say number one is like, do not neglect the body. Like if you take care of the body, it will take care of your brain and your mind. So that's number one. And there are books like it's very old at this point, but Spark, which looked at the effects of exercise on cognition and everything else. So if you want to improve your well-being, physical first, body first would be my general thought. The second is as a very short heuristic, just something to remember, is asking yourself how you can live life more on offense, not on defense. That's it. And I'm borrowing from a friend of mine, Chris Sacca. But meaning, if you ever open a social media app and you don't have something to look for, defense. If you're looking at your growing number of inboxes, G Suite, personal email, Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp, whatever it might be, and the question is like, how do I respond to these? That's defense. You're fucked. Because it's only going to get worse. So that is not a solution that scales if you telescope out a few years, especially with bots and everything else, or just people who are using AI to create personalized email. Like the volume is going to go up so exponentially that it's hard to even wrap our heads around. But if you're playing offense, it doesn't really matter. Right? And so really starting from like, what do I want? What do I need? right? Physically, mentally, intellectually, relationally, spiritually, whatever it is, and like making decisions from that, I think actually offsets or avoids a lot of the risk. Just like how much am I living on offense versus defense? And then other things not to do, I wouldn't invest in a bunch of AI startups.
Not good for sanity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to get into that, but it's like stay out of the froth, right? And also, like this whole idea, a lot of these techno optimists who are also happen to have like billions of dollars in AI companies, shocker, are like, we'll all become this leisure class where we just play tiddlywinks and bridge all day and paint, and it's going to be amazing when we're all just basking in all this free time. Ain't going to happen. It's never happened. This promise has been offered for every new technology. It's never going to happen. This is just going to create more opportunity for distraction and defensive stress. So I would just say, like, really look for the minimum effective dose. Related to that, before it gets any worse, like take social media off your phone for two weeks. See what happens. If you can't do it, you're a heroin addict. Like just, and guess what? If you're like, but I need it for my business, I'm like, yeah, batch it on your laptop. You can still take photos with your phone. If you gotta get it on the gram, fine. But like, take your photos, put them up later. Do it in one sitting. And again, back to the offense versus defense. But all of that is subservient to like body first. That will solve a lot of problems.
Can I give my body first factoid that I just read? There's a great new book by Mamouche Zoromoudi that's coming out called The Body Electric. And she shared this factoid that I didn't know before, which is that your core muscles, this is going to make everybody check their posture right now. Your core muscles are connected to your sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight. And where you're not activating them, when you sit in the cashew shape that most of us sit for like hours and hours a day, it activates your sympathetic nervous system, which releases cortisol, the stress hormone. Mamouche actually makes the claim that one of the reasons we might have seen such an anxiety spike with screens, you know, that hockey stick shape from Jonathan Haidt that Tim mentioned, it's actually not the content of what's on our phones, it's the posture that we engage in when we're on our screens. And if we just fix that, we might be able to be on screens longer and do that too. So this is my new one, as my grandmother used to say, tie your bosoms to the stars, everyone.
All right, I have to throw out a corollary to that, which is for the boys, don't roast your balls with a laptop on your lap. I'm absolutely dead serious. Not good. And for a lot of reasons, men's fertility is just going through the floor. It has been for a few decades. So we don't have time to get into all that, but like, don't have your laptop right on the twins. It's not good for them.
We're getting really good tactics right now. So Lori, do you want to bring us home with what you think that everybody needs to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think all new technologies are opportunities, but they work best if we stay aware and mindful and notice how we are feeling when we're using them. And so maybe that would be the final pitch, is like take time to notice, no judgment, just like mindfully noticing, do I feel icky? Do I feel tired? Do I feel burned out? Those are important signals that are going to affect how you can figure out how you need to reuse these technologies or change how you're using them to use them better. How you feel when you're using them is an important metric of whether they're working, not just whether you got great copy out of them.
Tim, any last words? It's okay.
Hold on. I'll bite. Let's see. Let me come up with something. I would say that. Okay, everything, just to really beat this dead horse on the physical, everything depends on sleep. And I'm not going to bore you with all the stats and details, but to get, like, either wear blue light blocking glasses, turn down your ceiling lights and so on a few hours before you go to sleep. And if you're tired during the day, don't fix it in the afternoon with caffeine. You need a different solution. And it's literally, it's like there are people who are like, I've meditated for 6 months and I saw these benefits, but then I slid back. I'm like, how much coffee are you drinking? They're like, 5 cups a day. And I'm like, if you get down to 1 cup before 11 a.m., it will do the same thing. Like in 3 weeks, you're going to feel like you meditated twice a day for a year. So just, again, be aware of how you feel. And the last thing I would say is, you do not need to stay abreast of any news that you are not going to act on in some way at all, 0%. So, for instance, I'm not going to point anybody out, but it's just like who? Well, yeah. Well, interested in a show of hands. Like who here, after being on X for like a half hour, comes away being like, I feel so much better.
World is such a calm.
Yeah, right.
Zen.
So you don't need to know what's happening in Turkmenistan. You don't. So I would just say, like, if it's not information you're going to act on in some way, you do not need it. Therefore, stop doom scrolling. You don't need to see the latest tragedy in Bangladesh. It's going to make you feel terrible. You're not going to do anything about it. And we're not evolved to deal with that. We are not. So I would just say selective ignorance is the path to some degree of peace. And it's informed, deliberate, strategic ignoring. It's not sticking your head in the sand. Those are two different things. So that's all I got.
It's good enough. Tim, we're not going to solve it all today, but I think what you've both brought is really helpful. And so please join me in thanking Dr. Laurie Santos and Tim Ferriss. Appreciate you both.
Do you know who this podcast is brought to you by? It's brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in podcasting and all of these adjacent mediums. You can not just make money with this thing. You can also use your influence for good. You can support great conversations like this one. You can support independent creators for the free and open exchange of ideas, of which this is such a great canvas. And if you're a marketer and you want to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, please visit oxfordroad.com. Would you? Subscribe to our newsletter. It's called The Influencer. And it is free, and it gives you lots of data. And if you like it, keep reading. If you don't, email us. If you have any suggestions for our show, email us. We want your feedback. It's info@mediaroundtable.com. Do you know how much we care about this medium? So much that we have a whole podcast besides this one dedicated to the craft of creative in this space. It is hosted by Stu Redwine, our head of creative, and it is called Ad Infinitum. I want to thank you again, Tim Ferriss and Dr. Laurie Santos, for this wonderful conversation. Thank you again to iHeart for hosting us at the St. Cecilia Hotel. Breathtaking during South by Southwest. If you took one thing away today, let us know, info@mediaroundtable.com. But I think the heart of it is, it really comes down to people, doesn't it? We're going to have more conversations like this, and you're going to be able to experience what we experienced at South by this year. We created a lot of great conversations and content, and we are going to keep posting that here for you to enjoy. And maybe you'll actually show up next year like you should and get to hear this stuff live. But either way, we're going to bring it to you. Come back again. We've got more great conversations coming out with leading marketers like Gladwell Mwengi of Whole Foods Market. She is so fabulous, as well as Richard Case of GoodRx, Brendan Monahan, the CEO of Libsyn, and Will Pearson, president of iHeartMedia. And then another conversation with Jason Kalkanis of This Week in Startups and the All In Pod. So a lot of good stuff happening here. Watch this space. And I don't know if you knew this, but this podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in podcasting and all of the surrounding channels. You can use your influence for good, and you can support the greatest canvas in all of media for the free and open exchange of ideas. If you're a marketer and you want to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, visit us anytime from wherever you are at oxfordroad.com. We got a lot for you. You're going to hit subscribe to The Influencer, which is our free weekly newsletter. Good content in there. You got feedback? We want it. info@mediaroundtable.com. And if you are really special and you love this medium like we do, you would not only produce a podcast about the art of creative and the science of creative in this medium, but you could at least listen to it, which is brought to you by Oxford Road, but Stu Redwine, who's our head of creative here. The show is called Ad Infinitum, and sometimes we slip it into this feed. Special thanks again to producer Haley, Bianca, Rocio, Kyle, Ezra, Paulina, Everett, Neil, and the team at Podcast One. As always, please influence responsibly.